Thank you very much. It's nice to be here. I think the last time I spoke at a Scottish meeting must be about 5 or 6 years ago, so it's nice to be back. My husband Kenny and I were sort of en route on holiday, so we thought we'd stop here, give a talk, and we're going off again. So, but what I've put together, it's quite a lot here. Don't think you're going to be sitting comfortably the whole time. I will be getting you to move around a little bit. But just to give you a bit of overview, I've been working in the area of CMT for many years now. I work with Professor Mary Riley down in London, so a bit closer. Is that better? Can everybody hear me? I'm known for being quite loud, so anyway. I started off working as a sort of a jobbing neurophysio, and then started to do research into walking issues and orthotics and CMT back in 2004. So the work's developed from there, really. So I've gathered lots of knowledge, and also I've been able to network with other rehabilitation and therapy researchers across the world, actually, who've been looking very carefully at CMT. So how I've done this talk is to tell you a bit about how your physio can help you, because I know getting access to physios can be really challenging. I know we've been doing some lobbying with Muscular Dystrophy UK about that, about access to specialist neuromuscular physios. And also just to tell you a little bit more about what people have been trying to look at and explore and understand. You know your own day-to-day experience of living with CMT, but for us, because we're trying to work out the best treatments or interventions, we need to look at everybody as a group and see, well, what are the main issues that we can help with? So I'll tell you a little bit about some of the stuff that's been looked at with that. Then some of the key things like exercise, orthoses, what works, what we found work, what some of the research has been. And I'm also going to get you just to try and explore a few things yourself. So most physios look like that, not all. But that's my generic physio. But with physios, we look at specific problems. So we'll sit, when somebody comes in, one of my first questions is, what's the main thing you want to change? What's the main thing you want me to help you with? There might be specific symptoms that are contributing to that. So I'll have a good look at that and maybe look at, well, how can we try and minimise that or address it? That's a bit of a physio term, optimise function, but it's just basically allowed to move better or do things better. It's always good to have a review. I think people who are just sort of sent off and then never see their physio again, that's a bit of a problem, because actually we need to see if we've been going down the right path. And then there's this new buzzword, it's not that new actually, but in rehabilitation called self-management. And that's not just about chucking people out just to get on with it. Some people naturally can do that very well, other people need a bit more support. But there's this, I like to change the name of it and actually call it Living Well with CMT. And what the ethos with this, and we're doing some work on this, is actually some people naturally just crack on and get on with it. Some people are a bit more tentative and just need a little bit more support. But actually allowing people to discover themselves, how far they can push themselves. Gaining knowledge, so that's why I come into support groups like CMT UK, who have lots of information about the disease process, about what actually happens to the nerves, listening to people like me and to Evelyn and Rita, who are speaking later. How you might set goals, so if there's particular things you want to target and you need to do, then how to work towards that and break it up. Actually then taking action, planning those action steps. Thinking back about, well, how did that go? Did that work well? Do I need to change something? So we need to alter, just tweak it a bit so I can actually get there. And problem solving is a big thing, and this is where sort of some coaching and help from health professionals can be useful. And also we can signpost to good resources that we know might actually be able to help you achieve your goals. So this is a big aspect that we're looking at, that we actually want to develop into more nerve and muscle specific support for this. That is some work we're doing at the moment. So the sort of things the physio might help you with: falls and balance problems. It might be issues with your hands. It might be walking difficulties. But what we'll do is we'll break that down. Okay, well, what's causing that problem with walking or falls? Is it because the muscles are tight? Is it because somebody's not very fit now, so it's more effort? Is it because their fatigue is a huge problem? Is it because there's pain in the feet or in the back? Is it because of the numbness and the lack of feeling? Is that affecting balance? the muscles weak. So if that's actually very complicated when you try and put it all together and look at how people walk. So when looking at walking, there have been people who've put like these little lights on the body. We can track walking, we can measure it to quite fine detail, actually. And so what's come through from those studies, those laboratory studies, I know you're probably going, well, I know this because I have to deal with it every day, but the fact that the foot drops, but also in some people that when the calf is weak, that actually reduces how much you push, and that's what slows people down. And we did a study, this is my old PhD work, my supervisor's not looking very happy there in the gantry, but we were looking at, well, which muscles are important, because you have to compensate, because most people can still walk, so what other muscles are having to work, and what's the consequence of that? Do they get tired? And we found that, yes, they did, don't worry about the numbers too much, but we found that actually it was the hip muscles, when they tired by about 20%, that's when people had to stop walking. They were just too tired to carry on. So we were sort of quite interested in those compensations. With balance and falls, we did a really simple survey. We surveyed, we got responses back from about 107 people, and because nobody had ever looked at that, well, how frequently, it was one of the meetings years ago when everyone was going, well, yeah, we fall over all the time, and I suddenly thought, nobody's actually recorded how often. And we found 89% of our respondents all reported falling within sort of 6 months to a year. And as you can see, you know, more than a third, more than once a month, some people really frequently. And where it happened, everybody's frightened of falling outside, because we did some interviews as well, so it's some focus groups, everyone's falling outside, but actually, everyone falls over at home. And is it because people take off their orthotics or their footwear, or people are just, you know, you're in your own environment, you probably don't concentrate quite as much. But that was, you know, something new as well. And we did a workshop a couple of years ago, and also through the Facebook page, we asked 2 questions because we wanted to know more. You know, what have you found improves your balance? You know, you guys tell us, and then we'll look at actually what helps in terms of directing the physio. So orthoses, walking aids, and footwear were really important. Exercise as well. Things like strategies and planning, and there were some other things. I thought alcohol to avoid or alcohol to improve, take your pick. Seems to be quite a difference. And then we also said, what do you do to prevent falls? We had a great response, actually, from the Facebook. It was fantastic. And yes, support and walking aids were important, but actually this was very interesting, that planning and paying attention and thinking about, right, I know I've got to go to visit so-and-so, how many flights of stairs are there going to be, what's that step into the front door, what have I got to hold on to? And actually that came through in our focus groups as well. We're just trying to publish that information, actually. So that's actually been really helpful to direct us, and I've got a PhD student who's working on the balance and fall side of things at the moment, although not at the moment because she had a baby last week, so when she's back we're going to get her back onto it. So, you know, I mentioned self-discovery. Well, balance is something I'm really, really interested in. We've been looking in the lab and going, well, what is it that determines what issues have with balance? Can everyone stand up? And have your chair behind you, but something solid in front of your table or the back of another chair, but so there's something within grabbing distance if you need it. Now, there'll be a bit of a split in the room, I can guarantee it. I just need to see how it is. Can you all hover your hands? Now, I'm looking out for, I've spotted perhaps one already, the people who cannot stand still. Well, not too, yeah, actually not too bad, because there are some people we find who cannot stand on the spot. They find they're sort of, some people recognise you sort of stepping around or your knees moving up and down. There's some knees moving, I can see a couple actually. And then put your hands on again. So what we've found, the people who have to, sorry, thank goodness, where their knees are bobbing up and down or they're having to step around quite a lot, that's often because of weakness of the calf muscles, because your calf, your ankle is like a hinge. I could draw it, I can do that at the end if you want to. So your calf muscles hold that hinge steady and stiff. So what we're interested in is the people where that happens. If you stiffen the ankle, maybe there's some sort of ankle brace or something like that, that can help to stabilise. But for those of you who weren't too bad, if you hover your hands again, but have your hands close to the table, and now close your eyes. Yeah, a lot of people, a lot of reluctance. Yeah. So some people find they sway around more, they want to grab. And so that's telling us something. You can open your eyes now, please. I don't know how to do any accident forms. So that's where the sensation's affected. And so we use 3 sensations to balance. We use our eyes, our inner ears, and the feedback from our feet and ankles. So if that's reduced, you're relying on your eyes and your inner ears. If you close your eyes, you've only got your inner ears and there's no hope then. That's when people find that they're all over the place. But we actually think that sort of balance problem is trainable. And there's a study we've just recruited, our first person to, I'll tell you about a little bit later, because as we know, CMT, brain is normal, and all the balance centres in the brain, we can train that like anybody would. If I decided I wanted to walk on a tightrope, I'd fall off lots of times, but eventually I would train to do it. So we're looking at how we might train that using sort of different exercises. You can all sit down. You'll be up again later, but let you sit down now. So has anybody had a physio look at your balance in that way before? Sort of try and make you do different things? Only a couple, yeah. It's something I do test in my clinic quite a lot, and I'm trying to encourage more therapists to look at in more detail, because you probably find those of you who've seen neurophysios, they're probably used to seeing people who've had strokes and maybe MS, but actually in terms of seeing people with nerve conditions, not so much of their caseload. So it's trying to sort of tune people into that. Okay, so one of the things that we're doing, because we're really interested in falls and what happens with falls so we can prevent them, or at least help people to problem solve how to prevent them. So we're developing this, we're using this in our study at the moment, using a smartphone, how to record falls. And so we're just piloting it in our study, and it's something we would like to actually roll out. So you might get an email from us via CMT UK, because actually more information we have about what happens, the more we know, the better we can intervene. So with this one, if somebody falls over, it's, when did it happen? Any injuries? Well, why do you think you fell? Where did it happen? So it's actually seeing patterns is very interesting. And also we think if people can look back themselves on their phone and go, I fall a lot when I'm, in the evening, when I'm tired, when I'm at home. So you can recognise the patterns yourself and maybe sort of start to think about how you plan around that. Right, now to something very different, which is problems with hands. So as many of you will know, if there's weakness there, if the sensations reduce, if the hands fatigue quickly and the grip patterns, that can affect how well your hands actually work, particularly with those fiddly things, we call them fine motor soft, but buttons, zips, backs of earrings, that sort of thing. And that can impact on everyday things and quality of life. And that's actually, again, it was one of those things where you think, well, I know that. But actually, for us as health professionals, nobody's really looked at until this lady who's a physio in Holland, was the first one to really start looking at that. And again, pain. And sometimes pain's a tricky one because people can complain of this musculoskeletal pain. So this is if the joints are affected or the muscles are tight. Often when you actually get up on your feet and you've walked a lot, that's when you feel it. That's what we call musculoskeletal. So it's part of the muscle and skeletal system that's causing it. And often people sprain their ankles a lot and have these repeated injuries. But there's other sorts of pain, neuropathic pain, and there are some types of CMT which are a bit more prone to this, where it's actually down to the nerves themselves, the little nerves, and it is more prevalent. And it can impact on function and how people move around and quality of life. So for us in the clinics, we're trying to work out, well, which one is it? Because actually, as physios, we can help this one really quite well. With this one, your neurologists are going to be able to help with medication. So it's important we know which one is which. Sometimes it's a bit of both, but it's important we sort of work out which one is which so we can make sure you get the right treatment. Tiredness, that's a bit early for everyone to be nodding off just yet, I hope, but we know tiredness is a big problem. Again, it's been surveyed, and people recognise that there's the normal tiredness when you've done a lot, tired legs, and if you've done a lot of walking, that's normal. Anybody would get that. But then there's the overwhelming tiredness that people describe, and this was some focus group work we did some years ago. So there's tiredness, and then there's the fatigue tiredness, and they're different things. There's normal tiredness if we've done too much, and then there's the overwhelming fatigue tiredness. And it's like a tidal wave. I can feel it approaching, and I just have to sit down and I'm asleep. And they've been looking at why the tiredness happens, and it's not clear, it's not cut and dried, because that would be really helpful if we knew why. We could target something and help people. But it seems to be that physical activity might have an influence somehow. So people who are more physically active tend to be less tired, but it's a little bit of chicken and egg, really. So because these are the things that people say your body's letting you down and everything's heavy. But we're interested in how active people are. Physical activity is an issue. So we've just published this study with some of our colleagues in Newcastle, where we had these activity monitors, and for 7 days, and then people without CMT with the same age, gender, and so it records steps per day. Now the government says we should do 10,000 steps per day to be healthy. I know I struggle sometimes. And but our control subjects, the people without CMT, they reached that. They were about 1,100 steps per day, and the people with CMT were about 6,500. So again, we weren't too surprised by that, because walking is more effortful and can be painful. But what are the implications of that lack of activity? One thing we did find, and actually we found this in both groups, is that it wasn't how much vigorous activity. So people, were all gym bunnies with CMT, or swam a lot, cycled a lot. That didn't make a difference to their body mass index, which is how big you are. So it's your height. No, I think it's your weight divided by your height squared, or something like that. It's a crude measure, but it gives you an indication. But it was actually how much time people spent doing nothing, sedentary time. So the bigger people spent much more time not doing anything. I thought, that's interesting. So it's not necessarily about, going to the gym. It's actually about your day-to-day behaviour. The other 23.5 hours that you wouldn't be doing that. So keep that in mind, because we'll come back to that in a bit. And again, as I say, we're interested in recording things on smartphones. So we're also looking at a way of recording physical activity. So this is something, again, that we may roll out. You might hear from us soon. So, thinking about specific physio treatments, any questions about any of that, what I've said, other than I'm stating the obvious, because you have to live with it every day. But any questions about anything I've presented so far? Okay. So, in terms of specific physical management, we'll talk about exercise. We'll think about balance training, although I've mentioned it a little bit, orthoses and splints, and then how to manage the tiredness. So exercise, everybody should be exercising. Joe Public aren't very good at it either, but we know about reducing the risk of lifestyle-related diseases, heart disease, type 2 diabetes, all of those things that can actually shorten our lifespan. No matter, whether you have CMT or you don't have CMT, these conditions can shorten our lifespan. So it is about that, and it's also about living well. It's also about the health, the general health benefits and well-being. So, but we know that generally exercise can make us stronger, make us do things for longer, reduce our tiredness, control weight, and improve mood. And there are different types of exercise. So we've got the fitness aerobic, and when I mention aerobics to people of a certain age, always remember the 1980s and Jane Fonda and her leg warmers, everything leaping around. That's just one. Any aerobic training is basically anything that gets you out of puff and gets the heart going up and you a little bit pink in your cheeks. That's aerobic training. Then there's strengthening the muscles themselves, putting some load on the muscles. There's stretching, and then there's balance exercise. So with the aerobic exercise, so it might be on a bike or on a treadmill, then that can increase fitness. And there's different ways that we measure fitness. But it's basically how long you can carry on before you have to just get pooped and stop. But if you're fitter, it means the effort to do day-to-day things is less. And there's some evidence that it might reduce the fatigue as well. And so I'd say it can be cycling. We use these bikes quite a lot. The sort of pointer's a bit pale, but the top one there, the recumbent bikes. A lot of people like swimming. I think swimming and cycling are two of the most popular activities for some of the people that see us in clinic. Then there's muscle strengthening, either using your own body weight to strengthen or using hand weights or pulleys and that sort of thing. So strengthening muscles. So we know that obviously the muscles below the knee and below the forearm are the more affected by CMT, But with the ones above, particularly these ones in your thighs and in the hip muscles, we know in CMT that they can be a bit smaller, but they're not necessarily affected by the CMT itself, and they're smaller just because they're used less, and that's reversible. We can reverse that. So they're much less affected. One of my colleagues at Queen Square, Dr. Jasper Morrow, he's been looking at that with MRI scanning. And we think it's really good evidence, actually, that we're using exercise to try and strengthen those muscles, the ones higher up, could actually give some benefits. Again, if your muscles are stronger, there's less effort, and you can get them a little bit bulkier as well. And this is just a really simple one just to strengthen some of the hip muscles, so just lying on your back with your knees bent like that, and most people can manage this, and then you just lift up. Gets all of those muscles, gets a little bit of the stomach muscles. These aren't affected by the CMT so much, so often people can find that. The difficulty with this one is getting your feet in the right position if your feet turn quite a lot. But certainly, if you don't use it, you lose it, and actually Dr. Morrow's work has actually shown that, where people are the muscles just shrink down a little bit. But it's all reversible. So we always advise the people when they are strengthening. Strengthening is, if you're using anything that's very heavy to strengthen, then we'd always say seek advice from a physio or a physical trainer who knows a little bit about the condition, because they can show you which muscles to strengthen to help benefit you the most and what position to do it in. And if some of the muscles are very weak, I'm always a bit cautious with some of the weaker muscles in the hands and around the ankles, because we don't know yet. There's been some argument, can exercise make muscles weaker? We think for the big muscles, definitely not. That all seems to be fine. With the weak muscles, we're still not sure. So we don't think so, but I'm always just a little bit cautious, so I don't tend to use heavy weights with very weak muscles. And we usually recommend low to moderate weight training. You say, well, what does that mean? What does low to moderate mean? Well, if you were to, say you wanted to strengthen the bicep muscle, you got hold of a weight, if you could do 8 of those and you just start to feel a bit tired, that's probably about right. And then you can go to 10. So if you can do 8, start to get a bit of effort, you can push to 10, that's low to moderate. And if you think about it on a scale of 0 to 10, 0 to no effort at all, 10 is maximum effort where you can barely lift it, it should be about 6 out of 10 for effort by the time you're finished. There you go. Forgot to put that up. And in terms of getting the muscle stronger, it's actually to increase the repetitions rather than the weight initially. So going up to about 12 to 15. In fact, the more repetitions you do, you get better endurance in your muscles. They can work for longer, which is a benefit as well. Now, muscle soreness is normal when you first start out on an exercise program. I get it. Karen's been telling me about hers after a trip to Italy last week. And if you do any new exercise, you will get that tenderness, that soreness. That's normal. That's the muscle remodeling. So don't be frightened by it if you're new to exercise. And it should fade after 48 hours. And I would find if I have it, you're walking around like John Wayne and you can't sit down and it's really sore. But it does go. And it's not a permanent thing. It's just, a normal response to new forces through the muscles. Stretching. If you have got tight muscles, I'm always giving out ankle stretches in clinic, and stretches to the foot as well, to the underneath of the foot, because if the muscles are tight, then it pulls your joints into positions which might be painful. So that's the one for the ankle. This is one we sometimes give for the hip at the front here. And we want to try and sort of reduce deformity or prevent deformity. So for the youngsters, actually it's really important to get in early with these stretches and make them a good habit to try and prevent foot deformities or tight hips. And if the muscles are working in their more normal ranges because they've got the flexibility to do so, they often work more efficiently. That's the theory anyway. But again, you have to be really careful not to overstretch, particularly if your sensation's affected. And we usually recommend that you hold a stretch for about 30 seconds. It shouldn't be painful. You should feel the stretch, but it shouldn't be painful. My rule of thumb is if I'm stretching, so I'm going to stretch my quads here. Yeah, it's a bit uncomfortable. I can feel that. As soon as I stop, that goes. That's fine. If I stop and it lingers, I might have stirred something up. But yeah, it shouldn't be painful, just that discomfort of the stretch. But if you have got reduced feeling, or say your feet are in a quite difficult position, then certainly a physio could guide you with actually getting the best position, because sometimes you just need to put a little wedge under the foot or a towel somewhere and to be able to stretch optimally. So I mentioned balance earlier briefly. So with balance training, the idea is to challenge people, but safely. Because if we go to the edges of our stability and we can bring ourselves back, the brain learns that. The balance centres learn that. We call that motor learning. And as I say, because the CMT effects down there, not in the brain, the capacity to do that, we think, is still there. So we want to be able to maximise that, which is the purpose of the new study I mentioned. So destabilising a little bit, I get people into different positions, get them to practice it. Well, maybe in the kitchen's a good time when you're waiting for the kettle to boil, give people their balance exercises to do there. Maybe not with eyes open, eyes closed, because that could be quite challenging, but it's like with turning your head and that sort of thing. So that's the principles. So it should be safe, but you should always be near something solid, like I got you to do with the table just now. So have something nearby. So you can, if you feel unstable, if you feel like you can't let go completely, say you were doing something like that, then sometimes just having fingertips, just a touch balance, can be really helpful. That's better than grabbing on. You're still exploring your limits of stability. And unlike strengthening, it's not about repetition, like, 8, 9, 10. It's about how long you practice for. So little and often, we like the little and often principle. So a few minutes a day, as I say, when the kettle's boiling is an ideal time. I sometimes get some of my people to be practicing maybe like this while they're brushing their teeth in the morning, because that's the time when they can grab the sink if they need to. So the next question is, okay, I'm giving you all this advice, but does any of it work? Who's looked at that? So one of our colleagues in Australia, who's done a lot of work, particularly in children with CMT, but also in teens, and he's very interested in exercise, Joshua Burns, who's a professor there, he did a study where you bring all of the papers together of all the little studies that have looked at exercise training, bring them all together, do some maths and see, well, actually when you look at them all together, is there a benefit or isn't there? So he found 11 studies. One of them was one that we did a few years ago. And there were more studies of strengthening, getting people stronger, particularly in those higher muscles. And they all found improvements in strength. And that was our first study, was a strength training study. That was the same. But with the aerobic training, the balance and stretching, there was only one study of aerobic training on exercise bikes, and very little as one study on balance. So there does need to be more work to answer those questions, but certainly strengthening, it's safe, and actually those muscles get stronger, which is good news. But this is hot off the press, hot off the spreadsheet. So we've just finished a study of bicycle training that we got people, actually, it was sort of London and the southeast, people training in their local gyms. So they did 12 weeks bike training on one of these sit-back bikes, the recumbent bikes, and then compared that to 12 weeks of them not training. And they did 3 times a week for about 30 minutes. And we had 28 people just with CMT1A in this instance. And 5 dropped out before they started. I think because actually 3 times a week was quite a big time commitment for a lot of people. And also we found some people were already exercising that, so there was no use us getting them to do what they were already doing. So, and then 3 dropped out for other reasons. I don't think it was because they got fed up with this. There were actually sort of other things that cropped up while they were doing it. So we've analysed some of the data. We also looked at, so we measured fitness levels. I'll show you in a minute how we did that. But we looked at strength and fatigue and sleep and body fat percentage. But the other really important thing we did is we interviewed people. We have a collaborator she's a professor of psychology down in Surrey, and she interviewed people on the phone, and she wasn't part of the main study, so she was a bit independent from us. And so what we found, these are early results, so the measure we took, this little mask is on my colleague Andy here, and he's pedalling away, and this is Liz, and she's taking all of the measurements. And so we're measuring how much oxygen he takes in while he's exercising, and we get people to work until they absolutely can't do any more. I mean, it's tough. It's a tough test. I've done it once on a treadmill, and it's hard going. And so we measure what the oxygen exchange is at that point, and that's a level of fitness that gives us an indication of fitness. And so the early result is, and we're still number crunching, is that the fitness levels, this is the measure I'm talking about, this is this oxygen thing, don't worry about all of that, but we get improvements in that fitness measure when people were training, and they don't really change when they're not training. So that shows that actually the 3 times a week exercise bike training did improve fitness levels. We're still looking at some other bits to do with that. And then if we look at what people were saying, most people said that they felt positive and they felt fitter. So it matched what we were seeing. They liked the sort of level of support, because what we did, they had gym trainers working with them weekly as well. So they had support from them, which I think was actually a real benefit of this. How that then translates into everyday life is the tricky bit, actually. And everybody said it had a positive effect on their well-being, or most participants. They found the gym instructors very helpful, and people were very interested in knowing more about the condition. A lot of them wanted to carry on exercising. I still haven't looked at it, but we then phoned them up 3 months afterwards to see were they still exercising. So we've just phoned the last person, so I'm going to go and look and see actually were they, because it's challenging. And a lot of people said, there were positive effects on their well-being and mood. What did come through and didn't put on there is that actually, in order for people to carry on exercising, they said, we gave them free membership for 3 months, and the free gym support. And let's face it, gyms are expensive. So there were a couple of people who said if they did want to carry on exercising, it would have to be with the same level of support. I get that. It's hard enough to get motivated. There was also a study presented last week in the International CMT meeting in Venice. Our colleagues in Italy, they've been doing a study up and down Italy in lots of different centres. And they had 53 people with CMT1A. They did a 12-week, twice a week, and they did a 2 hours, some treadmill training. I've got this picture, an old picture of ours, but I don't know if they had a harness. We used that just because of people feeling safe, but I'm not sure if they did. But it was people walking on a treadmill and also doing stretches and balance exercises. And they only presented some of the data, but there were some improvements in balance and well-being, and I think their walking speed improved. I was hoping to see their fitness measures, because they did the same with us, but they didn't present that. So we're still waiting to hear that. I want to see whether or not they got similar degrees of change to us, actually. Because, not everybody would like the bike. Some people might prefer the treadmill or vice versa. But if we know that it actually both give improvements, great. It's actually really helpful for them, people choosing different ways to exercise. And this is what we've just started. This is what I mentioned earlier. So we're doing this study of balance training. So we're doing balance and leg strengthening. One of the reasons for that, I said we did a lab-based study where we put markers on. We collected some information on falls for 6 months. And what we found was we got people standing still and doing various things, but also reaching forwards and reaching out to the side. And that's quite commonly used in other conditions, and it's been related to falls risk. And we found that related to falls risk in our 32 people with CMT. And what determined how far people would reach was the strength of these muscles. So that's why we've included leg strengthening in our protocol. We've just had our first person in, and so the study's fund, I think I've said, so thank you CMT UK, because CMT UK are funding this for our research physio, who's great. He's super enthusiastic, and he's chomping at the bit to crack on with this. So we've just got person number 1 in him, so we're out recruiting from our clinics at the moment. So it'd be very interesting to see if there's any change. This is a pilot study, which means we look at a small number, see is there an indication, and then if it looks promising, then we can apply for a bigger grant and do a bigger study. And I'm very keen on this, because I know what a huge problem falls and balance are, just from my interaction with people in the clinic, but also with this group for so many years. Problem is with exercise, is me saying, yes, exercise, getting fit, but it's not for everyone, the gym. And we acknowledge that. And it's about how to stay motivated. And we always sort of say, find something fun. And I always put this one up because this was one of the CMT UK meetings. There's Karen. I don't know where you are, actually, Karen. I think you scooted off at some point. But actually dancing, if dancing was your thing, I've got some people, a couple of patients come see us who do Zumba from their wheelchairs, but anything that is fun, that gets you moving. And don't underestimate convenience. You know, if you've got to trek halfway across town to try and get to a gym or to a pool, then there are those days where you're just like, yeah, I just can't be bothered. I do it. You know, I'm preaching about it. So some people say, you know, works well when they might have an exercise bike in the garage or something like that. Don't start too hard. Start really gentle. With our study, we were getting people to 30 minutes, but with some people they couldn't do 30 minutes straight off. So we did like little 10-minute bouts, 5-minute bouts, just to build it up gradually over the 12 weeks. Otherwise it hurts. It's sore. Build it gradually. And our professor of psychology I was talking about did the interview. She's very keen on this. She's done some work on this. So buddy systems, actually having someone to work with or exercise with, you encourage each other, can work very well. And this is me back to my goal, says set some targets, set some goals. You know, right, so I think I announced in April at the CMT UK meeting in Coventry my goal to everyone there, and I'm on it. So my goal was I was going to run the Great South Run. I'm a Southerner, I'm afraid, which is in October, on behalf of CMT UK, so I'll be raising money for CMT UK. And that's on the 23rd of October, and I am training. So actually, I've benefited from setting that goal, because if I don't have a goal, I don't really get the trainers on that much. So, you know, that's worked for me, and I've stuck to it. Otherwise, I'd have all the committee come and asking why I've not. Actually, but I think that's the thing about publicly announcing it, actually, because then you're accountable. But do you remember that graph I showed you? So actually, it wasn't necessarily how much vigorous activity, it was how long people just sat stationary for with their body weight. Well, there's this big thing now with what they call non-exercise activity. So it's not necessarily about going and sweating and on a treadmill. It's about actually just not sitting. You know, you hear, this is for everybody. This is not just people saying, this is everybody. You hear the term sitting is toxic. It's one of the worst things that's happened to the human race is how long we sit for. Our jobs make us sit, our transports make us sit. And actually, breaking up how long we sit for is actually really important. And what we're really interested in how you alter those sorts of behaviours as well. So whether it's setting a little alarm on your computer or on your phone, because I know sometimes if I've got a lot of paperwork, I can be sat still for 6-7 hours. That's not good. It's not good for anyone. So again, little and often, and things that generally get you moving. My husband likes to get me out in the garden digging things every now and again, and that's you know, it just breaks it up, and he does, he's nodding. and because we enjoy it, and it's something we can do together. It doesn't feel like a big formal exercise thing, but even if we're just potting around, weeding, or I'm just giving him instructions, then that's quite good. Just so you know, there's other information you can get your hands on. So Muscular Dystrophy UK have put together, this was done by specialist physios up and down the country, exercise guidance for adults with muscle wasting conditions. And that will be it'll be just as applicable to you as somebody with muscle disease or any other nerve disease, because the principles were designed to sort of be ones that people could just take on to be simple. So you can find that on the website, the MD UK website. It's a couple of years old, but I think it's still relevant at the moment. We will update it when it needs it, but at the moment it still seems to be fine. And a couple of my colleagues sort of led that work. I think it's quite useful. The other thing is that that's been done that some of you might have heard about. Rebecca, is she Lee? She's Knight. She's got married. I thought she'd got married. I wasn't sure what her new name was. Who has CMT, and she's also just she's a couple of years now qualified as a physio. So she's brilliant. I'm super keen to be doing things. So I helped her just with she did all the hard work. I just basically looked and sort of said what needed tweaking from the sort of research perspective. But she's done these great little videos that are on the CMTA. They're on your website as well, yeah. And they're great, and they're really simple. So some of them to do with stretching, some to do with strengthening. And Rebecca's done some well-being days as well for the society. So it's I think she's just going to be just such a ball of energy, I think, for getting everyone moving around. So have a little look. And we had a look through, and they're not too challenging. She gives you things you can do. If you do find them challenging, you can do them in the chair, or some things you can do on the floor. So you can have a look at those as well. Now, I'm not going to talk too much about foot orthoses. I'm going to talk about orthoses a bit, but because you're going to be hearing from Evelyn later, who is much more of an expert in this than me. But orthotics, so I've gone very quickly from exercise to orthotics, but orthotics is also something that, from a physical management perspective, we're very interested in. Like I was saying earlier, sometimes just stiffening the ankle can make quite a difference to somebody's standing balance. But you actually can start even closer to the ground than that with insoles that can adjust your foot position. So I'm going to leave all of the main detail about that to Evelyn. But in terms of being able to correct alignment or reduce pain and reduce pressure, they can be extremely effective if you get somebody good to do it. One of the things that we're looking at is a little update. We've just had our provisional letter back from ethics, where we're going to start recruiting for this soon once they're happy with us. Is that we're working with an engineering company that provides some, like a buzzing under the feet. So as you move around, if you move in that direction, you get a buzz from that side of the insole. Because just to see whether or not they help people, we don't know. They might do nothing, but we're going to try people out just in our little lab, just to see if they can actually get that feedback can be helpful. There's just been a study from Italy that have actually looked at using vibration as a way of improving sensation. So it's starting to be looked at. So if we found that we can do it in a wearable form, it could actually be very interesting. So we're just doing it just on a handful of people again to see, is there anything in this? And if there is, we will probably go for a bigger study. And these are things that people can wear every day. So it could be useful. It might not do anything, but unless you actually explore these things, you never know. Ankle foot orthosis, this is something I'm much more familiar with, and we've done a little bit of work looking at these. And some of you might recognise some of these devices on the side, particularly these ones that often are just handed to people from surgical appliance departments. Some of the fancier ones are carbon fibre, the silicone ones, calipers. There's so many different types. This is one we use quite a lot, the push brace, foot up. And some of them are made to measure, like these ones. So you get the plaster of Paris around your foot. Yep, a few nods. Some of them are just off the shelf, but they're just different sizes. Some of them are very flexible, like these. Some of them are very rigid. They all have different functions. They all do different things mechanically to your ankle. They can also influence your knee. They can shape them. They can influence your foot as well. So actually, it can affect the whole chain of the skeleton if you get it right. That can be the challenge sometimes. And there's been a few studies that have looked at different types of ankle foot orthoses. So, but they're often small and they might be on an individual device. And we know that there's hundreds and hundreds out there. So there's been quite a few that have shown that the foot drop can be helped by them. We found that in a little study we did, and there's others that have done that. And the sort of devices that have been looked at are plastic ones, ankle braces, carbon fibre ones. The Italians have been doing a bit of work on carbon fibre braces, the silicone ones. These sensory splints, guys in Australia have looked at that, which are just they're more like lycra. And so these little studies are looking positive. Nobody's taken a big look. And actually, there's so many devices to test out there. I don't think anyone's got the time or money, and the materials are moving on. So actually, we're thinking at the moment about maybe we need to look more generally at what the principles of each device, what they provide mechanically, and then actually look at how they're prescribed. So there's some work that we're just working up a proposal to look at that now. There's even less work on hand splinting. Has anybody here got hand splints or had them? So a couple of you, yeah. So they're either night splints to stop your fingers getting too clawed up, or there's some like this. Again, this is the physio from Holland, where because a lot of people find that their thumb drops back, actually this one just brings it to here and just means that people can just do a pinch grip a little better. And some of our OTs at Queen Square have been using sort of different types of devices to do this. And it's called a thumb opposition splint. And what I often do, if I think we might try them out with people, I'll just tape their thumb into that position and just see, well, does that make it easier to do things, pick up the pen or handle buttons? And if it does, then actually we will give it a try. It was only a little study that they did in Holland. It was only with 13 people, but they found that thumb opposition, made them a bit more dexterous. They could do the day-to-day things a bit better. Occupational performance, that's a real OT word, but it is about people being able to do those things they need to do each day, either for work or at home. And most people found them comfortable, not too bad, because only little, they can sort of slip them on or slip them off and into the pocket if need be. But a lot of people have a love-hate relationship with splints, and we're very aware of that. Often it's because perhaps you've not been fully looked at by people who really sort of understand the mechanics. See, sometimes, you know, a physio who maybe hasn't given so many out might just hand you something, or it might be somebody in the surgical appliance department. Whereas if it's a full assessment by a physio or an OT, if it's for hands, an orthotist, a podiatrist, you probably have a bit more success. You'll have somebody who's taking into account everything that you need. Then you know, they'll be able to best match you to the device that's most acceptable to you, but also gives you the change that you need. And that's a real trade-off sometimes, and I get that. You know, some of these devices can be really clumpy and massive and heavy. I know how heavy doesn't suit people with CMT, because we were aware of that when we were looking at the compensations in walking. And this is my golden rule. If you're ever given a device, you never accept one that rubs or gives you pain. Try them out, give feedback to the team, and then get them adjusted. Sometimes it's a bit of trial and error, particularly with the custom-made ones. If there's a bit of a rub somewhere, you go back. You keep going back until it's right. Because a lot of people's sensation effects you might not feel if you're getting something really quite nasty, a blister or an ulcer. So it's really important. You know, be a bit of a thorn in their side. Go back until it's right, because you have to for safety. Walking aids, I quite like that picture. There's actually no information about that, and the different types and how they help balance. People tell us they do, but nobody's looked at it and see what the best ones are out there, and what do people think about using them. I know a lot of people don't like using them, or they might use different types out there, but it's about knowing what, a bit like orthoses. There are so many now, different types of relator now, there's different types of poles and sticks, and do people use different things, different occasions? It's like having a quiver of different walking aids that suit for different times. So we did a survey. So Magda, my PhD student, did this survey in April at the national meeting. And so she's gathered all that information in, and hopefully when she's back from maternity leave, she'll do some number crunching, and we'll find out what the results are of that. We'll let you all know. It'll probably come through one of the newsletters. And then with tiredness, it's a bit of a tricky one, tiredness. There's some evidence that exercise training can help fatigue. We looked at fatigue as a measure in our one and didn't change that much, actually, which I was a bit disappointed. I wanted to, you know, I was really hopeful. I don't know if the measure we used wasn't great, or, but I would say we've only just started looking at the details of the study. But certainly if you strengthen a muscle and it's got better endurance, then it's less fatigable. So yeah, results of the training, I obviously haven't updated that bit, wasn't that helpful actually. But occupational therapy, they're starting to look at as well, looking at fatigue management, pacing and energy management. This has been looked at in other neurological conditions and actually found to be very effective. And this is where sort of the coaching and self-management side of things can come in as well, using assisted devices to conserve energy. And actually, for people who are working, actually having an occupational therapist go and do occupational assessments, make adjustments, just again to conserve energy for people, can be very helpful. Those of you who might go out and find a physio in your area, neurological physio, who might say to you, actually, I don't know very much about CMT, tell me more. Tell them about this. So we've put together, there's me and 3 other neuromuscular specialist physiotherapists, we put together an e-learning module. It's free for physios. They just have to go through Muscular Dystrophy UK, sign up for it, and there's 11 lectures on different conditions, on orthotics, fatigue, exercise, with wheelchairs, posture management, respiratory management, there's loads. And we've had really, really good feedback. We're getting, 4 and 5 star feedback from this. And so we're trying to let people, because actually you guys can actually help to educate your therapist. Because let's face it, how many of you have seen a physio who's going, you're the first person I've seen with CMT. Yeah. So, yeah, so there's a link on the website as well. And actually, we've had a great response from people, because to be honest, at the moment, they're trying to get good training with NHS budgets for a lot of my colleagues is quite challenging. So something that's free, they love, and they get a certificate at the end, so they're quite happy. But tell them about this. So if you do go and see one who says, I don't know much, say, well, have a little look at this, it's great, it gives you lots of information about CMT and other related conditions. So, there are lots of approaches that we use as physios. And physical management, and also it's not just physios, we work side by side with our occupational therapy colleagues, with our orthotics, podiatry colleagues, as well as our nursing and medical colleagues. And actually there's a lot of blurring happens across all of those different roles. But certainly in terms of the physical management, which I've given you a brief and hopefully not too boring run through today. But what we're trying to do is that best understand which physical management techniques and treatments work best. And we do want to try and educate physiotherapists and other people with neuromuscular diseases. Just to let you know as well, actually, that there was our physio module that Muscular Dystrophy UK did, but there's also a GP module that one of my colleagues, Dr. Quinn Liven at Queen Square did. So again, if your GP's the only person in the practice, then mention it to your GP. Because it is also about educating other health professionals as well. But we always want to know what you think helps, which is why I always come back and badger these guys and say, can we do this survey? Can we just find out and get more information? Because that helps us to understand and make sure that we're doing the things that are important to you. And we're researching the things that are important to you. And definitely, at the end, I think we should just all stand up for a moment, just to work on the principles of not sitting too long. So, oh, I'm a physio, I'm very bossy. I just have a little stretch, because, as I said, sitting is bad for lots of different reasons. One of those is our muscles get really tight around our shoulders as well, and that can give you pain. But actually moving, yes, so having a little jog on, well, not a jog, but a little wiggle on the spot and that sort of thing. And actually, I think at every single meeting there should be sort of hourly stand up and shift around and move around, because definitely the keep on moving message is really, really important. And I think, and hopefully, that's our aim, and we'll get there. Any questions? You can sit down now. You don't have to ask the question standing up.
Just to say, we've also got leaflets in the office about both of those modules. So if anybody wants me to send you leaflets that you can hand out to your physio and your GPs, just drop me an email and we can get some in the post for you.
Hi, morning. I'm a great fan of Michael Mosley, the Trust Me, I'm a Doctor series.
Yes.
And the current thinking seems to be that you're better to do very short, intense bursts of exercise rather than,
HIIT training.
grinding out.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm out on my bike of an hour, 2 hours a day, and that seems to be less beneficial than doing, short bursts.
It's HIIT, that's called HIIT training, high intensity interval training. It's very fashionable at the moment. And there does seem to be some benefits in terms of getting those fitness levels up. But in terms of the longer benefits, we don't really know yet. It's not been looked at much in people with nerve muscle disease. There's been a small study actually in group in Newcastle where they looked at people with muscle conditions, but it was a very small study. And it seems to be that some people tolerate it well, and there's been some groups in Denmark that have been looking at it, and they've been looking at it with strengthening, but also the aerobic side. And some people, looking at their numbers, people were sort of dropping out everywhere. So I think it's how tolerable it is for somebody. To be honest, I would actually go, in terms of long-term well-being, on that reducing sedentary behaviour. I think doing vigorous work is good, but I think there are potentially some risks associated with it, if in terms of people being properly screened. And I would say I wouldn't recommend anyone does it without some sort of trainer or therapy supervision, just until we know a bit more about doing it when you actually have another condition. So I'm being cautious with it. I mean, I know some people absolutely swear by it. I've tried it. It's a killer. Absolute killer. I'm too, I don't know. I'll plod for hours. I'm quite happy to plod for hours, but that's a bit of a killer. But it has been very fashionable for the time poor and the City of London and that sort of thing who've been doing these HIIT training exercises. But I don't think there's enough data on it yet, to be honest with you. What a lot of the training prescriptions we use is something called the American College of Sports Medicine guidance, and they update them regularly, these big sort of tomes that give you prescription guidance for people with different conditions, but also for the general public. And they are only, actually, I've just bought the new one, and I don't think there's a big section on HIIT just yet, but I need to have a little look. And because they really go through it very thoroughly. So I think I'm cautious until we know more, I think, is my answer.
Hello. I'd like to comment on a couple of things that Gita said. First of all, I did the exercise trial.
Our victim.
I don't live in London, so please don't think that you had to live in London to do it. I live 300 miles away from London. So the physios came to me, and I have degrees in laziness. So to get me onto one of these bikes was seen as something of an achievement, and it actually worked. I mean, I was probably the most surprised person in the world, but it did work. And not only did it help the muscles in my legs, I'm type 2 diabetic, it also reduced diabetes. The level came down because of the exercise. And I have to admit that when the exercise trial finished, I did carry on. Now, certainly where we live in Lincolnshire, there was something called the Healers Project. So in fact, we could get membership at the gym at a reduced price. Now, I believe this was a national thing, but unfortunately, austerity rules, the government cut it back. So I negotiated. I said to the gym, you know, the council-run gym, I'm quite happy to do it, but I'm not paying silly prices. Come along, you know, it's all good publicity. They bow down and said, yeah, all right.
Oh, well
So,
done.
you know, it's always worth negotiating. So the exercise trial I found was very, very positive. And as I say, I've got degrees in laziness, so there you go. Now the other thing about the orthotics. Now, again, I've had CMT for 60-something years. We've done the orthotics. I never found anything that worked. And I mean, these guys they tried absolutely everything. Until one day I came in to see them in a pair of boots, ordinary trucker boots, which I had to wear to work. And what the orthotics people said was, well, hang on a minute, let's look at this. Because it's providing support for your ankle, it's providing support for your lower leg. If we extend the boots, we'll send it back to the manufacturers and ask them to extend it. That might work. And it did. So it wasn't a question of having to have these wonderful splints or orthotic devices. It was just something very, very simple. But of course, the other thing that appealed to the NHS was it was cheap. So this actually found this worked. And it was really positive because the orthotics people actually listened. And they said, well, hang on a minute, yeah, this is good for you. We reviewed it.
Yeah.
And it was fine. Now, the other positive thing was the boots have got steel toe caps. Unfortunately, I lost the glass all over. The damage I was doing to my toe, big toes, was phenomenal. But of course, with the steel toe cap, it doesn't happen because it protects it.
I think these simplest principles are often the best, the most effective. But coming back to what you were saying about the exercise side of things, there may well be these exercise and prescription schemes in your area. I have success with some areas and not with others, referring people to them. It depends on the GP practice, to be honest with you. Because they tend to be targeted for people with diabetes and heart disease rather than people with a long-term condition, even though I've been lobbying about this to Public Health England, actually, that people who have existing disabilities need this, if just as much, if not more. But but do exactly what Kevin says. Go and you know, be a bit of a pain and tell them that actually, no, I need this. And now that we're starting to gather evidence, this is what's been recommended for my condition. Here it is. Here's what's the advice that's out there, and try and get support. But it is tricky. But glad you enjoyed it. No.
But it really was positive. I mean, you know, the exercise, and the most important thing to me was the diabetes level was great.
Yeah, I mean, there's lots of evidence for that in diabetes anyway. Lots of evidence for exercise and lifestyle management.
I think Kevin's basically covered one of the questions I was going to ask, which was about exercise prescriptions. Have we managed to do any deals with any other change-ins or anything yet? So
we tried with Fitness First, and then they suddenly shrunk and went back on all their deals during the trial. We've had some interesting negotiations with them.
okay, we'll leave that.
It is very gym dependent, and actually you mentioned council gyms. They are often much better. They are much more welcoming and interested. I will name and shame actually, but so the gyms that we had a total nightmare with David Lloyd, really not interested. Fitness First were pretty good in some branches. Virgin Active, a bit variable. But the council gyms and some of the small hotel gyms, like the one you've got here, fantastic. Really welcoming and really keen to get involved.
I'm a member at Marriott Leisure Gym, and they've said that they, if we as a charity want to join it, we can join as a business, and so you will get cheaper membership.
See if we do with Hilton as well.
Yeah, so we'll actually do that. One question I wanted to ask, I exercise 3 or 4 times a week for hour-long classes, and you said that if you're still aching after 24 hours, 48 hours, then it's too much, and I do. So, you know, what do you do? Because I don't want to stop with classes. Will that eventually reduce? You know, will I be able to build up my stamina and strength?
We're going on information and science from non-neuropathic muscle. So it's called delayed onset muscle soreness.
Yeah.
And that's supposed to last for about 48 hours, and it reduces with training actually. So the more you train, the more that dissipates.
So keep it up and ignore it and fight through it.
So keep it up. But we certainly observed that there are some people who get a bit sorer than others, and we're not sure why. And I don't know if so Rita's here. I don't know if you find that as well. But there are some people who complain more of muscle soreness than others. So I think it's probably a little bit variable, and it's not been looked at in detail. I mean, with the exercise trial, we didn't find it to be abnormally long in both exercise trials, the strengthening one and the aerobic one.
I don't mind. I'm not fighting and complaining, because I see it as a positive pain that I'm actually doing something good, so that's fine.
But is it in your muscles or is it in your joints?
It depends which ones I'm doing. A lot of mostly muscle thing.
Yeah.
But you know, it would be nice if I could sort of say, well, you know, if I keep this up for another 12 months, then I might actually reduce to only be hurting for 48 hours instead of 72 hours, you know, after something. You know, and I'm happy to do that because I love doing what I'm doing.
Yeah, if you're loving it and you can get back to it.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
That's why I've left lots of time for questions.
Yeah, hi. I just had my over 40s check, and I came back all good. Apart from they said, you know, you've got to do a bit more sort of exercise, get the heartbeat going, and that has been on my mind quite a bit, because you know I go out, I travel a lot with work. But one of the major things that has stopped me doing that is sort of that my mind saying, surely, you know, exercise on a bike or hardcore swimming is going to do more harm. So. But I'm quite keen to get an exercise bike, do a bit in the evening. So are you generally sort of saying, with moderately managed, it's good just to go ahead, do that kind of exercising? You don't need to see a physio before?
With that sort of exercise, I mean, and you know, I think you would be fine. When we were doing our aerobic training trial, we were monitoring pain levels, fatigue levels, but also we took a blood measure to see if there was any extra muscle damage. Nothing. Everything was absolutely fine. We monitored that very carefully. And we found no evidence. No other studies found any evidence of that either. So the problem is, I think, it's worries back from when people were small, you know, that they were told not to exercise. But I would say start gradually. You know, start just a couple of minutes, build it up. You know, the one thing with travelling around, often hotel gyms are available and, you know, that sort of thing, but just start gradually. And that's where the exercise guidance that we did for MDUK is quite helpful, because it sort of gives you like a guidance on what intensity to be working at that's easy to follow. I mean, we push people reasonably hard for our exercise trial. We got people working to sort of 60 to 80% of their maximum heart rate. That's quite intense. So everyone was fine.
Okay, thanks very much.
That's reassuring.
Yeah, thanks.
I was wondering what your advice is about vibro gyms when you go in the machines and you do, because I find I like the gym for the strength, for the muscle building, but aerobics just shatters me. So I like to go for I've got more stamina, like strength and stamina, but I quite like the vibro gym. So is that
Lots of people ask me about that. It's like a power. They call it power plates or vibro plates. You stand on them. There's a sort of a vibration, and you stand and sort of take different positions. Lots of people have asked me about them, and we did a bit of we looked as a little physio group. Sorry, Karen, I'm moving around. It was a little physio group, research physio group. We thought, well, people keep asking, so what's the evidence for it? We found, of course, there's nothing in CMT yet. Nobody's looking at, although this new thing from Italy, but that wasn't a plate. That was just putting a probe on a muscle. It's been looked at in older people. It's been looked at in people with MS. It's a very small piece of work. But in athletes, there's some evidence that if you stand on a vibrating plate, it means that the muscles are recruited faster, and you know. But that's relying on a normal reflex arc, so that the nerves are intact to be able to get that effect of vibration. Yeah. So so you know, in order for that to work well, we've got the nerve that, you know, they've got the nerves come out of the muscles that pick up the vibration. They go into the spinal cord, and then the nerve then that makes the muscle actually work. And that should be, and of course, then in CMT, that's in the lower muscles. That's not active. It will be higher up. So I don't know. I'm reluctant to give any fors or against. I think if you do it and you enjoy it and you're feeling fine with it, then I don't see a problem. Whether or not it's more effective, my gut feeling is actually moving is probably better. So putting some load on your muscles, like with the strength work, I think is probably better. And actually, strength training is great. You know, it's not. I'm not saying do one over the other. We did a study of strength training as well. And if it's something you enjoy, then like I said, you've got to enjoy it. If you absolutely hate aerobic training, then you know you listen. Yeah, but then doing it very gently can be quite nice, and also just other ways of doing it that's not so high intensity. Something is definitely better than nothing.
I was just going to say about getting your GP might be able to refer you to the gyms if you have a long-standing condition. I know in 5 the GPs refer you to the gym to go and do swimming or any kind of exercise, and you only pay a reduced rate. So that might be something some people can look up.
I think it's very variable.
St. Shire, it used to be when you were disabled, you get the swimming free, and if you had a helper, you get in free. Now they charge you £52 a head.
A year. Well, I know in 5 I go swimming twice a week, and I get it at what, £3.20. And then there's other classes that you can. Well, if you want to go join it for a month, it's about £20 a month,
Yeah.
and you can go and do different kinds of classes.
I think the fact that there's different experiences. This is what I experience as well. I'm referring people all across the country, and it's very variable, which is why finding out, but also we have had some people who've gone to their GP commissioning groups, and actually we've provided a bit of information for them to say, look, I actually need this, I need the support with this. It can be a bit of a battle sometimes. Sometimes it's easy. It's a bit of I hate to use the cliche, but it is a bit of a postcode lottery.
I really like swimming, so I go there quite often, and the actual being in the water bit is fine, but I'm finding it almost impossible now to walk around in the changing room, and I was wondering if there's any sort of footwear or anything that...
Wear socks. Wear socks in the pool and the changing room. That's not a joke. Just your little trainer socks. It's amazing. You come out of the changing room and your feet then stick to the floor. You don't slip. And in the pool. Oh, seriously?
The slipping isn't the main issue. It's, I don't know, even getting in and out of the pool. Like,
is it foot drop? Yeah. That, I wouldn't have even thought of that, Karen. I love that. But sorry? Plastic socks. Yeah, I mean, it's what other people have tried. I haven't anything. The only thing that is marketed that can be used around pools are the silicone AFOs, and they're about £600-700 each. But I'm sure there's much more reasonable alternatives. Plastic socks, yeah. Oh yes, like the surfing ones. Yeah, the neoprene boots. That might be something. Because sometimes that's enough. £6. Better than 700. Yeah, yeah. Yeah. Because we use neoprene in some of the ankle braces anyway, and actually it's really comfy as well. And with the foot drop, you don't need a lot of rigidity to reduce foot drop. It can just be a little bit of elastic or a bit of neoprene. So it might be worth trying something like that. It's
Can I just add a little note of caution here?
Yeah.
And that simply is that with neoprene or rubber or plastic type socks in a swimming pool, be careful you don't slip on the polished tiles.
Well, the neoprene boots have a tread on them.
But even so, in personal experience, they can slip. So you have to be just careful of that. Can I just ask you perhaps just one final question?
Yep.
Before we have some lunch, Gita? Going back to the question of balance.
Yes.
This is from a personal point of view, and I know affects several other folks here. It's the perennial question about the peroneal muscle, actually, which of course is what keeps the foot lifted. Now, if that's wasted away, as it has in my case, the foot drops, and you try and stand up, retain balance, and what happens? You start walking backwards, because you can't bring the body forward over the foot. Now, what exercise, if any, can overcome that?
It's not quite that, actually. I am going to get the flip chart out just to show you. It's actually, what you're describing there is more an issue with the calf. So, this is what we found in our lab study. So, if you imagine, the ankle is one big hinge. So there's the shin bone, there's your hinge, you've got the knee and everything above. There's your foot piece. Okay. And so any hinge that's got no control will just turn, yeah? Just pivot. So yes, you have the muscles at the front that pick the foot up, so the tibialis anterior, the peroneals actually tilt your foot that way. But actually, what controls standing, just standing still, are the big calf muscles going into the Achilles tendon. And that's, we only discovered that when I was starting to do my PhD, so it was about 2002, they worked out that it was these muscles here, that when we're standing, they kind of, because we sway forwards over our feet, they kind of catch you back. These muscles are actually really quiet. This is people without CMT, so this is what I would be doing. It's actually these muscles, and what we've found, and I know Mary Riley coins this the knee bob. We check for it in clinic, and it's the same thing. It's the stepping backwards or the knee bob, is because these muscles have got weak, and the quadriceps, now the big thigh muscle that go into the knee, below the knee, they're trying to work really hard to control the shin bone that's got this free-floating hinge, which is why what we're saying is if you sort of stiffen the ankle with a brace, so that it's not floating around so much. Sometimes that can stabilise people, which is, we might do that with orthotics. There's not been many studies in the lab that have looked at how effective that is. So when we said we're doing that vibrating insole study, we're also going to put some Shackly braces and see how that helps stiffening the ankle. Just while we got people there, we thought it would be useful to have a little look at. So it's that one. Now the problem is with the muscles below the knee, we know they are primarily affected by the CMT, less so up here. So actually the potential for getting that back, if the CMT is already affected, and we know from the MRI scanning work that the bits of the muscle that have been affected primarily by the CMT, the muscle fibres are replaced by fat. So there's no muscle fibres there, we haven't got anything to work with. If there are some there, we might be able to get them a little bit stronger, but it depends on how much that's happened. So if the calf is very skinny, and if we were to scan and it looks very white, then I don't think exercise would be effective to that. But going higher up probably would, maybe stiffening the ankle here probably would. Does that make sense?
Yes, that makes sense. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I'm sure on behalf of you all, I would like to thank Gita, who's interrupted her anniversary honeymoon holiday to be with us. So she's done a fantastic job as always, and thank you, Gita, once more for coming to join us.
Thank you.